Guys, on October 14th, 2011, a strange event occurred. One, two, three, 569? On October 14th, 2011, in the event called the Sudden Departure, 140 million people disappeared. All of a sudden. The event I just mentioned took place in a fictional story in the TV series The Leftovers, and it was only about how the disappearance of 2% of the world's population would affect the rest. Of course, back then we were 7 billion. The world population has now exceeded 8 billion. What if, instead of just 2% like in the series, the entire population suddenly disappeared? Poof. What would the world be like? Silence. You noticed it, didn't you? That would be the first thing to change. All this noise would instantly give way to silence. We're not aware of it, but as humans, we make a lot of noise. Some of it is necessary, some of it is very unnecessary. Noise pollution. Maybe if you go somewhere very far away that isn't easy to find anymore, maybe you just did. Deep into the forest. You close your eyes and start listening. A very peaceful silence. So peaceful that you can even hear the sound of leaves hitting each other as the wind blows through the trees. Then a bird chirps in the distance, then another one nearby. They can be very noisy as a group. Then a plane flies over. I told you it wasn't that remote. We didn't even leave a place where we wouldn't fire at ourselves. Anyway, let's continue imagining as if all humans have disappeared from the world. Our homes would suddenly be empty. Except for our pets. They would probably face the biggest challenge. I hope there's an open door or window they can escape from, because once the food inside runs out, they'll have to go outside and fend for themselves. But of course, as we all know, things in houses tend to break down. Especially if you're in a region with harsh winters, since there would be no flow, the pipes would probably freeze and burst. And when summer comes, water would start leaking from these places. The wood would get wet, and a different damp atmosphere would fill the environment. I think we all know what comes with that. Molds. Those who would benefit the most from our absence are actually the ones we see as the biggest enemies. We actively try to prevent mold from spreading. In our absence, these molds would likely spread everywhere, starting from the walls. Of course, that's good news for some organisms that feed on these molds. Not only molds, but insects would also spread. The land is now theirs. Of course, many animals would complain about this situation. Thanks to them, the diseases they carry would also begin to spread. And these diseases would threaten some species. It's a bit difficult to predict what would happen to the ecosystem, but if we could be there, we would notice that the sky changes, because there would no longer be gases from cars or dust particles flying out of chimneys. Of course, the existing pollution would have to go first. For a while, the winds blowing and the rains falling would clean the pollution just like cleaning a balcony. The blue of the sky would look even bluer, the sun brighter, the clouds whiter. Yes, we keep talking like this, but things are about to get complicated and more than 8 billion people are still alive. Moreover, we need to communicate with them more than ever. The most valid way to do this is to learn English. Of course, in our absence, there would be no electricity. Once there is no one left to operate and maintain the facilities, after a while they would stop working. All the lights would go out one by one, until no bright place remains. And then the lights of the sky would turn on. Once light pollution disappears, we could see the stars in the Milky Way that we normally can't see in the sky. I say we could see them, but of course there would be no one or no consciousness left to see. So what's that green glow? Nuclear reactors? Could things go wrong since there's no one left to take care of them? But modern reactors are designed with such scenarios in mind. Of course, I don't mean the sudden disappearance of humanity. These aren't that extreme scenarios, but you probably understand what I mean. In such a case, after a while, emergency protocols would activate and try to cool down the reactor. And even if there's no one to fix the situation, most leaks would remain under control thanks to containment shields. So living through post-apocalyptic movie scenarios, like a giant nuclear power plant exploding and making the surroundings uninhabitable, doesn't seem likely. But we can't say the same for roads and buildings. Of course, buildings and asphalt roads wouldn't suffer major damage in just 1 year. But after 10 years, they would probably look like this. Grass and trees emerging here and there through the cracks of broken. Once that sprout comes out, it's impossible to stop it. Invasive plants like ivy would start covering buildings. Think about it. What better way to reach sunlight than climbing a tall building? Of course, not only plants but animals would enjoy this situation. At least wild animals. Joking aside, wildlife would be quickly affected by this situation. After all, we have our own territory and we work very hard to keep them out. Without us, the boundaries would suddenly expand and a new area would open up for them to explore and live in. But unfortunately, this isn't good news for our pets. The ones who managed to escape and roam the streets would now become prey. Of course, some cats and dogs might be successful at hunting, but they also need to avoid becoming prey themselves. Starting Monday, the first thing I'll do is lose those extra 4 kilos. The animals in our homes aren't the only things we've removed from their roles in the wild and helped live under better conditions with our intelligence. Many crops we grow, like tomatoes, potatoes, and corn, without our agriculture, most of them would disappear. At best, they might survive in very specific regions. They would be replaced by invasive species, those ubiquitous wild weeds that grow everywhere and are of no use to us. This would be sad news for animals in farming regions that are used to feeding on such food, because they would need to find new food sources. Nature returning to its own light. When the lights go out, life sprouting over the asphalt we poured onto concrete. Hearing the sound of silence, what we took returning to nature. With our disappearance, it seems like nature takes the reins again. We have such a great impact on nature. That's why we call what we do artificial and the others natural. As if we aren't a part of nature, but we clearly challenge it. In this scenario, everything may seem beautiful, as if everything in nature would be wonderful in our absence. As if everything natural were better than what we have done. But these are only the tip of the iceberg. With the level of consciousness we have reached as humanity, we have saved many species from extinction that would otherwise have disappeared in nature. Even though some of us tried to eliminate them, maybe we will soon bring mammoths back. If you remember, I made a video about this topic. Again, using our intelligence, we transformed those vegetables and fruits that weren't very useful to us in their wild forms through artificial selection. Look at this banana, isn't it beautiful? It doesn't even have seeds. Look at this one, small and full of seeds. This banana is actually the ancestor of this one. We did this, then we did this too. But now when we do the same to watermelon, seedless watermelon seems like a problematic idea. But I love it. As humans, we didn't just domesticate cats and dogs. We also domesticated vegetables and fruits. We added diversity and value to the world. Let's look at the full side of the glass, but at the same time, we also caused a lot of damage. Let's talk about the empty side. We did both. By learning from our mistakes, with the desire to explore and improve, we can move further and find solutions to bigger problems. Or we can create even bigger problems ourselves. Everything happening today, every problem we see, emerged exactly like this. We don't know whether one of these mistakes could one day wipe us off the face of the earth. But if it does, the traces will remain for a long time. Just like how we now find and examine the ruins of ancient Rome. Maybe then someone else will come and examine our past, and they will write why we failed. If you liked the video, don't forget to hit the like button. See you, and as always, stay well. As always,